Okay, we're about 2 minutes into the hour, and so we'll go ahead and get started here. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Cynthia Hudson-Vitale, and I'm here today representing the Association of Research Libraries. And I'm joined today by several fantastic colleagues, Kat Cozier from UC Riverside, representing UC Riverside and currently at Fresno State, Brianna Wham from Penn State, Matt Carson from Northwestern University, Andrew Johnson from CU Boulder, and Becky Grady from the California Digital Library. Other project members are listed here as well. And today we're going to talk through the MAP pilot and share some early reflections from our institutional case studies. So here's just a quick overview of today's session. We'll begin with kind of a pilot project overview of what MAP is and what we are trying to accomplish. And then we'll hear from our participating institutions on what they've explored and what they learned. And we'll wrap up with some common themes in a Q&A. You can find out more details by visiting the project site at this bit.ly or by scanning the QR code. So as I mentioned, we're here today to share a quick overview of the MAP project, which is short for Machine Actionable DMPs. And this is a collaborative project led by the California Digital Library and the Association of Research Libraries. This project has been supported by IMLS, NSF, and the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. And at its core, the MAP project is rooted in a simple but kind of powerful idea of data management plans, or DMPs. They don't have to be static compliance-only documents. They can be dynamic, machine-actionable tools that actively support research workflows, automate reporting, and really improve coordination between libraries, research offices, and IT. And, as research data management evolves beyond kind of this compliance-only model, institutions have been asking, how can we make data stewardship more strategic, scalable, and responsive to researcher needs? And so through this project, we're testing how machine actionable DMPs, or what is sometimes known as maDMPs, can support these goals. So what exactly is an maDMP? It's a structured, machine-readable version of a traditional narrative data management plan. It enables automation and integration. So a single DMP could support workflows across systems like grants administration, compliance, reporting, and even repository development. And the idea is that it's also iterative and kind of living in that it can be updated over time, versioned, and used to track outputs and guide decisions across the research lifecycle. And, these changes are not happening in a vacuum. Federal funders like NSF and NIH require DMPs as part of the grant application. And in the CHIPS and Science Acts of 2022, it specifically called out machine-readable data management plans. So the API is one way that the California Digital Library is working towards making this interoperability real. And the goal is to allow all DMP functionality to be done through the API. They're already piloting features like DMP uploads and funder API queries through this API. And they're tracking external system activity, such as when a DMP, or even when a DMP wasn't created in the DMP tool directly. And you can access some more information about the API documentation through this QR code or through the URL here. There will also be a webinar later this summer that goes into more detail about the technical aspects of maDMP. So feel free to sign up for that webinar later on as well. So we thought it would also be helpful to talk through like the principles that underpin maDMPs. First, they rely on structured metadata and machine readability or availability using standards through the research that were developed through the Research Data Alliance and persistent identifiers throughout. Second, they are versioned and updatable with IDs that enable tracking across time and projects. And finally, they're designed for system integration, so pulling from funder APIs, connecting to repositories, and fitting into different tools that are used in the research lifecycle. So just quickly, through the pilot project, We specifically explore the adoption of maDMPs. And we're examining how AI, automation, and interoperable frameworks can improve both local coordination and national infrastructure. And they were designed to test several core use cases. First, to showcase the potential of machine actionable DMPs, how structured standards-based DMPs can do more to meet funder requirements. Second, to track outputs linked to DMPs, so things like data sets, publications, and software that will really enable institutions to understand where research is being shared and where gaps kind of remain. Third, to investigate the role of libraries in supporting research data management and policy implementation, especially in an era when AI compliance pressures and campus expectations are kind of all converging. And finally, to demonstrate the value of DMP infrastructure to our communities, and really trying to make the case that when we invest in coordinated machine actionable systems, we can really unlock some of the efficiencies and insights that benefit researchers and institutions in the public. So to support this work, I should have also covered that. The IMLS funded cohort, which ran through 2024, focused on integrating prototypes, testing standards, and really developing new functionality and test it out. So we're fortunate to have a highly engaged set of institutional partners through this pilot project. The IMLS funded cohort included Arizona, Northwestern, Penn State, University of California, Riverside, and University of Colorado, Boulder. And the extended cohort included NYU Langone, Stanford, University of California, Berkeley, UC San Diego, and UC Santa Barbara. So now we'll move on to examples for 4 of these institutions to highlight what this looks like in practice. So turning it over to Kat, please.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Kat Kozier. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. The project at UC Riverside. Yeah, we focused on 2 areas. The first was investigating the space of how DMPs support providing and gathering metadata required to deploy computing resources for research projects. We wanted to create a pipeline between the DMP, between the machine actionable DMP and a research workflow using the DMP as a source of truth. The second area we worked on was to help track research outputs and to create automatic notifications to campus stakeholders. The UCR team represented 3 divisions: the Office of Research and Economic Development, the College of Engineering, and the library. We had some challenges midway through the project as I took a new position at Fresno State, but I was able to stay and to coordinate the project. On the next slide, we connect our project goals with our implementation and outcome, which is a proof of concept application that integrates with the DMP tool API to pull in DMP information and provides a portal to deploy virtual machines using Google Cloud Platform. The app also provides a notification and tracking system for various approvals with the initial investigation on sensitive data. On the next slide, I highlight the part of the project which is our focus for this webinar, the automatic notification of data security plan requirements and centralized approval tracking system. And before I talk about our solution, I want to provide a little more background on the problem and how we got to the solution. Next slide, please. Data security plans at UCR are their own documents. They're supplemental to DMPs, supplemental to IRBs. DMPs talk about data security at a high level, but data security plans are 9 to 10 page documents that detail everything needed to make sure that research data are secure. They provide very granular information of who has access when, encryption, logging and audit systems, storage and backup, and even approved applications. And the goal is that they are filled for every research project, but that isn't always the case. And I knew that that was a challenge. So when we started the Machine Actionable DMP project, I reached out to the IT security analyst at UCR to share information about Machine Actionable DMPs and how they might help him with data security plans. Would it be helpful to at least have a notification that someone was awarded a grant where in the DMP it was indicated that there was some type of sensitive data? And in this conversation, he shared that at that point, the point of awarding of a grant, it could be too late in terms of data security. That in his experience, the funded project also includes a budget that details specific equipment and computers, but often what is listed in that budget are insufficient for the data security requirements. And his concern was that that conversation needs to happen when the PIs are developing the project proposal. And that was his challenge. And so that's what we wanted to focus on, how to include those notifications at the beginning of the project development when it's easiest to course correct. Honestly, my very simple solution was to just use a Google script to send out an email notification. That was something that I've done before. It's easy to implement. We just needed to have a trigger in place, between the creation of a DMP to then trigger the notification to data security. And that's what we had in mind while we were working the larger project, which was to deploy computational resources. And last summer, Victor shared that he had a student employee, Taha, who is a wizard at software development. And what if we just create our own app as a proof of concept for deploying computational resources? And that's what we did. And then as that developed, we were able to incorporate the notifications. And then we were able to incorporate approval tracking into that central app. On the next slide, we see some screenshots of the app. It pulls information from the Machine Actionable DMP, which is hosted on the DMP tool, and that information includes an overview of the project, including funding sources and other information gathered by the DMP tool. The next slide has two screenshots. One shows deploying computational resources. The other demonstrates a tracking and commenting system. The tracking and commenting allows documentation of things specific to the project and also provides a centralized place for campus ITS to review and approve things. The next slide has a screenshot of what is, in my opinion, the best outcome from the UCR project. We created a notification and tracking system for campus stakeholders. DMPs, as I've discussed, aren't standalone documents, but provide a plan that should be integrated with other parts of the campus because often the other plans and identification and budgeting of equipment should be created in parallel with the DMP. Not only are notifications sent based on machine actionable DMP elements, but also the app was developed to send emails to different IT offices and to keep track of all technology communication with the project that previously would be by email and then just in somebody's inbox where we don't always necessarily see. Next slide, please. All right. The project allowed a broad understanding of what DMPs are across divisions. Before the project, most people had more of a general understanding of the idea of a concept of what DMPs are. They didn't understand the specifics of how they could benefit researchers. We had a lot of conversations about reducing the burden on researchers and focusing on benefit. We know that DMPs are mostly seen as a checkbox to complete because usually they are too general in detail to be of use. But what would it look like if we were able to get more granular details from them? And what are the challenges associated with that? A large challenge is data security, including who has access to systems when. And a detailed list of that is useful, but that isn't something that should be published publicly in a DMP. That led us to develop something in between. A key to this success is that the library is a neutral stakeholder who has broad understanding of how information and DMPs integrate with the larger campus research support systems and services. UCR's next step is creating a campus level research computing portal, which will keep track of things like security and access, who is authorized to access research computing projects, and it will allow the PI to update security and to keep track of that. And they're going to integrate machine actionable DMPs as appropriate as part of that new portal. And a next step of mine here at Fresno State is to talk with people here about machine actionable DMPs. In my year here, I've heard people in tech services describe challenges to managing research storage, compute, equipment, and I keep thinking a machine actionable DMP might be able to provide a solution to that. And so I'm in the initial stages of just like letting people know what this is about. But back to the project at UCR, it would not have been, we had not been able to do this if we had not been flexible in our end approach and our end goals. I think that was actually like my main takeaway on that, is being flexible, because that's the main reason the project was successful, that we kept open communication about the challenges and kept our goals in mind and had a positive mindset to try to find solutions. Try to find solutions. And that's it for UCR. And I think next we're going to hear from Matt at Northwestern.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, I'm Matt Carson. I'm the head of the Digital Systems Department at Northwestern and Industrial Sciences Library. Last January, we had the opportunity to join the MAP pilot. And in addition to testing their machine actionable features, we tried to learn more about our own institution's research data landscape and to build collaborations across our campuses. Next slide, please. Most of the team for this project is located in Gulter, which is part of the Feinberg Medical School. Next slide. So we're physically separated from the main campus up north in Evanston, and the university governance structure is such that Gulter reports to the Feinberg Dean, while the Northwestern University Library, Central IT, and other units that we interact with report to the provost. In addition, some of these units serve the entire university, while others, like Gulter, provide services only to Feinberg. So we have different but overlapping user bases. And because of this, there are times when the priorities from our respective units don't overlap, but we've been making concerted efforts to align our goals, especially around supporting the NIH data management sharing policy and other RDM support. Next slide, please. The last several years, our department has managed a research support core for Feinberg that we call the Data Lab, which follows a primary care model for data-related consultation. After a researcher contacts us, we'll meet with them to discuss their issue and determine if it falls within our expertise, and if so, work with them to resolve it. And for issues outside of our expertise, we or specialized or long-term support, we refer them to our research services partners. Leading up to January 23, when the NIH data management sharing policy was coming into effect, we were asked by the dean to lead the effort to support this new policy, and we knew that was going to be a big lift. Feinberg provides about 70% of all research funding across Northwestern, and 62% of that funding comes from NIH. In fact, in 24, Feinberg was 13th in NIH funding among all medical schools, American medical schools. So providing this service was going to be a team effort, and those of us at Gulter have been trying to establish relationships with different institutional stakeholders and with units to build capacity for DMSP support and other RDM support since then. Over the past couple of years, many of our NE partners have also been undergoing reorganization, bringing in new hires, and retraining existing staff to support RDM activities. Next slide, please. The MAP probably gave us an opportunity to continue moving in this direction and to engage and build trust with our campus partners around these services and to demonstrate the value of machine actionable DMSPs to partners in their workflows. It also allows us to create a more complete picture of the RDM services landscape at NU and to see if there were areas where to make improvement. And We also wanted to create the foundation for the future with integrations for research information management systems and possibly institutional repositories. Next slide, please. Some of our early efforts were focused on the basics. Like we were starting from where we just needed to coordinate our services. So we worked on creating collaborative and centralized RDM services across campuses. And thanks to our partners in research computing and data services, especially Till and Magley, we have a really nice website that links out to our various resources for RDM planning, data sharing, et cetera. We established a university-wide RDM consultation service that uses the IT ticketing system. And our culture team became co-administrators of Northwestern's DMP tool instance so that we could contribute to support for the tool, update documentation, and continue incorporating that tool in our guidance and our classes. And finally, we established regular meetings with data services groups, as well as a quarterly data sharing meeting with the administration of units in Feinberg, like the Dean's Office, and Feinberg IT, and sponsored research, so we could discuss issues and trends in researcher support. I'll talk a little bit more about some of these efforts in the next slides. Next slide, please. So research data at NU is a joint effort between Northwestern University Library, Research Computing Data Services, and Galter. And it uses the IT Service Management Portal, which is a central location for different IT support services. It has a knowledge base with instructions on how to change your password, access listservs, that kind of thing. And there's also an agency list of services that can be searched, and each service has a description page with a link to a consultation request form. Researchers make a request either through the service page or by affiliated email, and then these requests are routed to through the ticketing system and distributed to the support teams. Next slide, please. So our consultation workflow starts with a request from a researcher, which is routed to the service management portal and the ticketing system, which notifies all the participating members of the 3 partner units by email. And then those members review the requests. And if it's one of their topics, a member from that group takes responsibility by going into the ticketing system and assigning it to themselves. That person then responds to the request, and this email chain by default is sent to everyone as an FYI. If the requested topic is not in one of our groups, we can respond to the ticket and bring in additional service units by adding their emails to the chain. So IT helped us set up this workflow, and it's been working fairly well, but we still had a bunch of service request pathways, and some of them we were able to address by making them part of this, and one of that's the DMP tool. Next slide, please. So those of you who have used DMP tool probably seen this, but on the project pages, there's a tab that allows you to request feedback. Initially, in our instance of DMP tool, we had set this up, or someone had set this up to so that the request was routed to an email address monitored by a librarian at NUL. And we changed this to research data at Northwestern so that we could bring the DMP tool into the established communication channels and share the responsibility. So it wasn't just one person having to check this. And also we wanted to share the information with a larger team. So you can see on this page, the user is told that they will receive a response within 48 hours, and they can email the research data, if they have any other questions. Next slide, please. So now when a user requests support for a data management sharing plan through DMP tool, a message is sent to the service management portal, and it follows that existing workflow that I just talked about. Next slide, please. And we thought it made sense to also move our Galter Data Lab service into this workflow. So in this case, when a researcher requests data lab services, the notifications are only sent to Galter personnel. However, if we need to ask for support from other groups, we can request that as described before. So, the DMP tool, adding this DMP tool and adding data lab to the service management portal is pretty low hanging fruit, but it was something that we could do that really has benefited us. But the DMP tool has an API, and data could be passed from it to other tools and workflows on campus. And this could be useful in reducing researcher burden and improving workflows. Next slide, please. So during the MAP pilot, we met with our university partners and we conducted interviews with research services personnel. And we identified some of the stakeholders, the tools, and the documents that are part of our research services landscape. And then identify which of these could benefit from the structure and content of machine actionable DMSPs. So from this, we tried to identify stakeholders that, one, had an interest in pursuing collaboration with us, and two, were able to contribute some effort toward this. And really, if we want to make improvements to this landscape, we're talking about how to make it possible to get certain data where it needs to go in an efficient way without duplicating any workflows or processes. And in talking with some of our partners, we decided to focus on creating well-defined proof of concept projects that demonstrate how our research services can be improved in a specific workflow if we made a change. So similar to what Kat was discussing, our IRB requires a data security plan from IT for each funded project that involves someone from appointed to Feinberg or anyone who is using Northwestern Memorial Hospital data. This DMSP includes data classification, data platforms to be used, where the data is going to be stored. Very similar to what Kat was discussing. So what if we were able to connect these documents through PIDs or be able to notify IT or IRB when an MSP is created to help them plan? So as Kat was referring to, not waiting until the funding happens and then everybody rushing to complete these documents and figure out what is needed, but helping them plan and allocate resources earlier on. Next slide, please. So currently, we're working with our partners like the Office for Research, and IT to show how changes like this I mentioned will benefit the services and to demonstrate a workflow. And we're also doing demonstrations on how DMSP data can be extracted using the DMP tool API. So we have some API scripts in the GitHub repo shared with devs and our partner units. We're discussing possible integrations with their tools, and also considering creating a DMSP template that would include the information that IT requires, so that researchers could put that in beforehand, and this could be notified. And we continue to encourage just simple acts like researchers who use the DMP tool to add links to their DMSPs into their research outputs when they use repositories using the DMP ID via a related identifier field or something similar when possible. Next slide, please. So I just want to say thanks to our project team and all the research services partners that participated in our site visit and interviews. Special thanks to Sarah Gonzalez, who did a lot of this work on the pilot and the site visit, as well as Tony Mackley, who has done a lot to help centralize these resources, and to help us set up communication between a lot of our partners. Well, thanks. We're passing it to University of Colorado.
All right, thanks, Matt. Yeah, I'm Andrew Johnson, and I'm representing the CU Boulder project team. And so I want to thank the project leads for the opportunity to be a part of this pilot, and also to have the chance to present to you all today about how it went for us. And so I think I wanted to start with our project team slide to show kind of the breadth of the people involved. And we had kind of a large group of people that we pulled together when we were putting our proposal together for this pilot. And that was kind of led by the Center for Research Data and Digital Scholarship here at CU Boulder, which is a libraries and research computing formal campus collaboration. And so three of us, myself, Matthew Murray, and Adi Ranganath, are the folks on campus who do most of the consultations around data management plans, helping researchers write and improve those. We also oversee data curation support in our institutional repository. Our team is led by Thea Lindquist, so she's one of the executive directors of CRDDS. And then Barb, Layla, and Shelley represented the research computing side of CRDDS, and Shelley's the executive director on that side. Barb and Layla do a lot of support for HPC infrastructure, large scale data storage, secure data storage, things like that. Then we also had a group of folks from the libraries who were kind of not part of the Center for Research Data and Digital Scholarship, and Vita and Sam were on board. They support the IT side of our repository, our institutional repository, where we house over 2,300 data sets to date. And then Jamie is the assistant dean that oversees that part of the library. So she was involved from a leadership perspective. And then in terms of other campus partners outside of the libraries and research computing, we wanted to bring in sort of a group that had a more disciplinary focus. And also CU Boulder is the largest recipient of NASA funding for all public universities. So we wanted to try to focus on something that had a tie to NASA funded research as well. And so we reached out to the Laboratory for Atmospheric and Space Physics, and we were excited to be joined by Doug Lindholm representing that group as part of our team. And then we had a colleague, Karen, who's one of the research administrators on campus in our Research and Innovation Office. And so Karen came on board to represent that sort of research office perspective and also to help us with some of our goals around getting access to data management plans and evaluating what that kind of workflow and pipeline looks like for all grant proposals across campus. And then finally, we brought in a couple of folks from our faculty information system, which is the group that oversees our faculty profile system, CU Experts, our sort of research information management system, which is called CU Boulder Elements, and does a lot of the kind of research information tracking work across campus, which was key to several of our goals. So next slide, please. So as you can kind of see from the folks who make up our team, we all brought these different goals and specific to our units to the project, and they kind of fell into three large categories, which we had from the outset. And then a lot of the really interesting work of the pilot was kind of starting to go down the paths of each of these goals and seeing where we ran into some barriers, some expected, some unexpected, and then where we were kind of able to have more success, which informed the direction of the pilot work, as I'll describe later. But generally, from a high level, the three categories of goals we had were things around alerts. So this, as the other pilots have already kind of mentioned, has to do with trying to get a better sense in terms of resource allocation and planning and things like that of who is writing CRDDS resources, so our repository, large scale and secure data storage, HPC infrastructure, which PIs are writing those into proposals that then get awarded. And then some more kind of specific speculative alert ideas around secure data in particular about tracking that throughout its life cycle. We also wanted to kind of leverage DMSPs to better track research outputs associated with grants to help with public access policy implementations. And then finally, and this was kind of the goal we did the most work on, as I'll describe, we were looking to integrate information related to awarded DMSPs in two directions with other systems on campus. So our faculty profile system and our research information management system. So using those systems to improve the quality of DMSPs, and then and vice versa, using DMSPs to feed back into those systems. Next slide, please. Some of our specific activities that we did to try to make progress on those goals were we explored the workflows and pipelines for getting access to all the pre and post award DMSPs on campus. We've been in the kind of DMP game since 2011, and we did a whole bunch of work at the campus level in those early days, but it had been a long time since we'd done kind of a whole scale look at all of the processes around DMPs across campus. So this pilot gave us a great opportunity to kind of reassess where things are now with those. So that was some important work that we did there and learned some lessons. We also evaluated a lot of the possibilities around creating alerts and what we could potentially do based on what we learned from the first step in terms of accessing DMPs. We used two large projects to use as kind of exemplar case studies to try to make like high quality DMSPs and see what sources of information we needed to do that. One of those was NSF funded and one was NASA funded. And we did a lot of work around assessing kind of the existing sources of data that could feed into DMSPs, and then how DMSPs could integrate with those and with other campus level systems. And then at the very end, we did a little bit of preliminary testing of the DMP tool API to try to automate some of these integrations. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but this was one of the results of our kind of landscape analysis of all the different sources of data, both internal and external to CU Boulder, where we could find a lot of the information that we wanted to machine actionably connect to DMPs and to other systems. And so we found a lot of these were, kind of only partial sources and they weren't really connected in any formal ways. But we did have some starting points where we had a pretty solid and complete connection from our perspective, from the information that we were looking for. Next slide, please. And so that helped us to kind of do a gap analysis and see where we could potentially work on finding solutions to improve these connections. And so we got some ideas for those, and we're starting to kind of go down the road of improving those connections. Next slide, please. And then, as I mentioned, we were working with LASP for two reasons. One was kind of the NASA-funded aspect, but the other was that they have their whole kind of own data infrastructure within their large research institute, which has missions, across the entire solar system. And we wanted to see how their kind of local data infrastructure could potentially leverage machine actionable data management plans to meet their needs, but then also connect to the campus systems. And so this is just, again, a high-level overview of their infrastructure with some goals about how that might connect to the campus work. Next slide, please. So I think some of the most interesting parts of a pilot project like this are like really kind of running into and identifying where you hit some barriers in this work, and that's helpful for understanding which directions are potentially fruitful and which are things that might need to be reevaluated. And so one of the things we found out right away was that it's still very difficult and labor intensive to obtain any DMPs on campus, which are the vast majority that are not created in the DMP tool. We need to get like permission from each individual PI to access these plans. And so that was really kind of a difficult workflow to envision as something that we could do at scale. And so that changed some of our ideas around how we could potentially generate alerts for when some of our resources are mentioned in DMPs. We also, from the kind of small subset that we got, saw that a lot of the content in these DMPs was not super useful anyways. It didn't go to the level of specificity of naming specific resources. We do have some DMPs that are created in the DMP tool, and so theoretically could be more active and returned to by PIs, but it doesn't seem like that's actually happening in practice. So we need to either do outreach around that or probably more likely be the ones to actually be updating these plans, hopefully in an automated way. We ran into a kind of a specific barrier around regulated and secure data. Some of the goals around the alerts there, we realized that those would need to be in a system that was as secure as the data itself. And so that was an important finding, but one that kind of was outside of the scope of the pilot, and we're going to keep in mind as we go forward. And then one of the particular connections that is super important that we found was really difficult to actually find kind of in the wild was tying data sets directly to grants. So if you found a data set, often it was impossible, or you had to know an associated article to get back to the grant. Next slide, please. Yeah, so from these, beyond these barriers, we did get a lot of kind of important information and takeaways that are informing our next steps. We obviously know that collaboration, based on our project team, is super important across campus for this, and that we need to improve those connections. We have a much better understanding of how maDMSPs could help us improve our research information ecosystem. We have certainly, as the diagrams I showed demonstrate, we have a much better awareness of the gaps where we need to improve connections and integrations. And then I think importantly, without any mandate to use the DMP tool or to create machine actionable data management plans, we're really going to have to focus on showing PIs what the value of this is to them. And so we got some ideas there. Next slide, please. And then I'll wrap up just by talking about some of our next steps. So we are still working, and we're excited to continue the work beyond this pilot. One of the things we're doing right now is producing kind of a final report and recommendations, since we had so many groups on campus involved, for a campus audience based on the lessons learned and some potential recommendations there. We're also updating all of our institutional DMP tool guidance and templates to integrate the lessons that we learned, potentially use those as a first step in creating the alerts that we were looking for use of our resources, some specific questions pertaining to those resources. And we've also begun already enhancing our kind of data curation workflows in our institutional repository to improve what we're actually putting into the data site metadata, and kind of enhancing that to specifically create better connections in the wild between data sets and grants. So making sure that grant IDs are in that data site metadata for all of the data sets in our repository. And then, of course, we want to continue the cross-campus conversations and collaborations. And so this was a great kind of jumping off point to get those going again. So again, thanks to everyone for the opportunity to present here. And I think we're going to turn it over to Penn State now.
Great, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Brianna Wham, and I will be representing the Penn State pilot project today. We set out to strengthen our campus-wide coordination for research data management and to also explore the potential of machine actionable data management and sharing plans to improve research support services. More specifically, our goal was to investigate how leveraging the information from within these plans could enhance both service efficiency, reduce researcher burden, foster collaboration among both our research support units and researchers themselves, and proactively address evolving research needs. We focused specifically on two key areas: social interoperability and process improvement through alerts and resource allocation. Today, specifically, I'm going to be focusing on the social interoperability in our cross-campus engagement. Next slide. We organized a 2-day workshop to bring together key stakeholders involved in research data management and sharing. Our objectives were to raise awareness about what are machine actionable data management and sharing plans across campus, and to explore their potential to improve communication, streamline data workflows, and support scalable infrastructure. The workshop engaged research administrators, research support staff, IT professionals, and researchers from across the university. We had representatives from all of our major research offices and research institutes. The first day began with level setting activities to map out the research project lifecycle and to clarify how each stakeholder's work fits into this process. We then examined what information a traditional data management plan contains before diving into an introduction about machine actionable data management and sharing plans that included real-world case examples to spark ideas and discussion. Next slide. On day 2, we explored the benefits and challenges of implementing machine actionable data management and sharing plans from the institutional perspective. This included a closer look at Penn State's current research data management environment and a discussion on what information from machine actionable data management and sharing plans would be most valuable to each stakeholder and at what time it would be most valuable throughout the life cycle. Next slide. One of the key activities to show an example of this asked our participants to identify their role in the research project and the research data life cycles and outline the challenges and opportunities that they face at each of those phases. Through this and other exercises that we did throughout the 2 days, we uncovered that many institutional units shared a vested interest in machine actionable data management and sharing plans, but they approached the information differently based on their specific responsibilities and how they interacted with researchers. So for example, one participant described data management and sharing plans as a list of promises researchers make to funders about how their data will be preserved, shared, documented, and secured. Understanding these commitments at the time that they're made and tracking how they could change throughout a grant emerged as a critical need for units that are managing data storage, security, human subjects protections, sponsored programs, and compliance. And so mapping these distinct perspectives, identifying what information each unit needs, when they need it, and how they collaborate with other units and with researchers is essential for us to successfully integrate machine actionable data management and sharing plans into our institutional workflows. Next slide. The workshop surfaced several institution-wide challenges related to research data management, while also fostering process sharing, breaking down silos between our units, and building cross-campus connections. It helped strengthen relationships among stakeholders and improve institutional awareness of machine actionable data management and sharing plans, which we're hoping will then more easily set the stage for future coordination and integration efforts. Some key takeaways we had from our participant feedback that we sourced after this workshop was that attendees stressed the importance of ongoing cross-unit conversations in order to sustain the engagement and momentum around information sharing related to research data management. We also had participants highlight the value of ensuring all stakeholders have relevant information at proposal submission and award stages to streamline workflows. Something that my fellow presenters have talked about here is having information at the right time. And from that, there was a proposal for a research data management advisory committee that would support this type of coordination. We also had a clear need for IT support to integrate machine actionable data management and sharing plans with our existing research administration systems. And lastly, the workshop underscored the need for a university-wide strategy to support long-term stewardship and adoption of machine actionable data management and sharing plans. Furthermore, we did surface practical recommendations from this workshop for others that are looking to pursue similar work. One of these is that it's important and valuable to start with stakeholder engagement. So involving key units early to discuss roles, challenges, and expectations around machine actionable data management and sharing plans is vital for implementing systems and processes that actually will impact the workflows in a positive way. We also wanted to prioritize collaboration before technology, so a foundation of shared understanding and collaboration makes the technical implementation more effective. And lastly, there's a need to clarify data needs and workflows, so identifying what information each unit values and how it moves through their processes to shape a useful machine actionable data management and sharing plan strategy. Next slide. And so lastly, what are we going to be doing next here at Penn State? We are going to be continuing to strengthen cross-unit collaboration and communication, making sure that we are keeping the momentum we had from this workshop, having everybody together in one place and actually talking about our workflows. We're also looking to map the data management and sharing plan content to our research support services and to determine where they line up and where we have gaps. And lastly, we're also exploring how we can use the information in machine actionable data management and sharing plans to enhance service engagement, compliance monitoring, and resource allocation. And I will say this is a place that we are kind of moving forward quite quickly with some of the compliance monitoring aspects is how do we actually take the information within those DMPs, create that, as the participant described, kind of list of promises. So it's also more easy for us to track what was promised and also for a researcher to know what they put in there and update as necessary. And hoping that that will also help with resource allocation and notifications. And so with that, I will pass it off to the next person to talk about common themes and findings. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks you all of our presenters for sharing the awesome work that's been done at these different universities. I'm going to wrap it up just with a few minutes of some common themes that we saw, and then we're going to open up the rest of the time for questions. I see some are coming in on chat already. Please continue to put them there, and we'll answer some of them in text and some of them live. So just as a couple of wrap-up themes, some things we've seen across these presentations. One of the things we saw a lot is that there's a lot of decentralized policies going on. So there's kind of often a lack of a centralized data governance model at different universities. And we heard a lot about a number of the challenges that brought about from universities trying to implement machine action plans, but there's opportunities from that as well. So some of the challenges from this decentralization is that departments often have their own, sometimes conflicting policies and procedures. We heard a lot about information silos and different departments working with the same information, but from different angles. And that can make it difficult for researchers and others to know what to expect, know how to follow policies, and to really create a unified policy across the university. Libraries were often not aware of or involved in policy changes. So sometimes there were things going on, but departments were sometimes not talking to each other, not aware of what each other was doing. It can be hard to get buy-in from people to use machine actionable tools or to participate in open science policies when it's not clear exactly what that oversight is, what that accountability is, if there isn't any kind of central mandate. And we also heard a lot that effort is often duplicated throughout the research lifestyle. So a lot of information is entered multiple times, or there's just different units doing the same work. So these were some common challenges that we saw, but there were also opportunities that come from that. There's room for groups to take initiative and leadership. So one of the things we heard about is how the library in some cases was becoming that neutral central hub for research data management. Often it can be a starting point as a model like that primary care model we heard of, or just kind of somebody that is helping to put in process new policies and procedures that are going to shepherd research data throughout its life cycle. We also see these investments in collaboration and things that machine action plans bring outsized rewards and benefits. So when there is a lot of duplication of effort going on, that means that something that can simplify a particular process is going to help a lot of different departments beyond just a single one. So there's a lot of opportunity there, but it's going to take some additional work and investment to be able to reap those benefits. Next slide. Another common theme that we saw from these projects is the growing concern around security. So we heard from a couple different people in this presentation today about data security plans. This is often, this is happening across the board for research data. One of the questions came up about how often this happens, and the security plans are required for all research data, but particularly when there's classified information, people working with government contracts or sensitive data like health information, there's especially going to be a lot of concerns around security. So we often are pushing for data openness and data sharing and public access, and that's still very important. But a lot of universities are going to, and for particular data, are going to be especially concerned with limiting access as well. Many universities are requiring these data security plans. It's not specific to just UCR that we heard about. And that goes into well more detail than the DMP. So there's a lot of area for us to continue exploring there about how to pair these together. We need to figure out how we can help support this, tie this together, and make sure we're not duplicating effort across these different documents. And we also see that this brings in opportunities to bring in, IT departments, computational resource departments, the provisioning departments. There's a lot of opportunities to get the machine actionable plan to include more than just the library, more than just the data policies that they are often dealing with. Next slide. On the DMP tool side, one of the goals of this project is to learn more about how people are using our API and what kind of improvements people need to build these integrations and get the benefits of machine actionable plans. And so one thing we heard about, there were a lot of limitations to our API that we were offering that hindered some of the integrations people wanted to build. And so, for example, and I'm going to talk more about this on the next slide, the API only works with the published plans, but a lot of people wanted to get notifications or work with plans that are still being drafted to get in there early and provide feedback. And so we also heard about people not updating their DMPs after the fact. And so that means that the information they can get from the API will be out of date. So we are working on a DMP tool rebuild right now, which is going to involve the large revamp of the API, taking into account the kind of things people want to build so that we can really help support a data management plan throughout the entire process of the research lifecycle, not just the submitting plan phase, but writing the plan, drafting, and then tracking it after it's been updated. And we're not just doing this alone. We're working with the Research Data Alliance, which is a global community, to try to get a unified API structure across DMP service providers, ones like the DMP tool, so that if, for example, a university wants to build an integration with the DMP tool by connecting to our API, it should be very easy to build similar integrations across other services as well. We don't want to lock people into a single service. Next slide. So just to give a couple of specific examples, as mentioned, we're going to have a future webinar that goes into a lot more detail about the technical side of the API and how to work with it. But one thing that people could do right now is you can already create and register and work with DMPs through the API. But the metadata is in a structured format, things like the contributors and the title and the funder, but the narrative of a DMP, so the actual answers to the questions that the researcher types in, those have to be in a PDF right now. So we are working on making the entire narrative be part of the structured data so that you could build a full integration and not have to pass PDFs back and forth. We also want to be able to allow people to work with unpublished or draft DMPs, which will allow a lot more opportunities to build integrations with DMPs before they're actually completed. The last thing that we heard a lot from people, and you will heard them throughout this meeting today, is about people want to get additional notifications and triggers and emails when things like a new DMP is created or certain things are mentioned in a DMP. This is definitely something we're exploring and want to support. It might be difficult for us to build the full kind of email server that is what people are talking about, but we want to make sure if people want that sort of feature, we are supporting with the fields needed, potentially for people to be able to build that very easily on their own side, as long as we have the information available. Now, next slide. And finally, just the final point that I want to make, and this is pretty high level, but it's something we heard a lot, is just the importance of communication. There's a lot of technical work going on. There's a lot of cross-department collaboration. There's a lot of policy work. And it is absolutely critical to build this communication, this rapport between departments. We heard across the board from our partners that there are a lot of powerful benefits and efficiency, but it requires that human connection, talking to people in different departments, building up regular things, and creating that connection so that we can really find from each other what are the areas that we can build something that's going to work for everybody. There's a lot of focus on efficiency right now, about scaling, about using, getting more done with limited resources, and really figuring out this cross-department collaboration is going to be critical to bringing about this sort of change. Machine actual plans are a big part of that, but it's to bring about that full potential, we're going to need those connections between all these departments working with research data. So that is the end of our first webinar, and we have a lot of time open for questions. So we hope that we, inspired some people to think about it, and we hope you're excited about some of the things you heard. There are a few questions that have been asked so far, so I'm going to start reviewing those in chat and to give you some time to put in more, and then we will answer them live. So I'm going to start with two that were already asked of Kat from UCR, and I'm just going to kind of read the answers we already sent in case people didn't see them again, while I give people a chance to write in additional questions. So somebody asked who owns the data security plan at UCR and what type of research data is it done for? And at UC Riverside, ITS owns the data security plan. In the IT risk management department, it's been in place for several years, and it should be for all research data. There's a couple links in the chat. You should all be able to click on those to see it. You can't see the exact template itself, but there is information about the UC classification guides about data security plans. And there was another question of Kat, and then I'll let her add any more if you want, but is there a requirement that researchers create their DMP using the DMP tool? There's not a requirement, and I will add on that in most places we saw it is not a requirement to use the DMP tool. A lot of people want researchers to because of the benefits it provides for tracking, but it's usually not mandated. So it's often encouraged, or people are looking at ways to change campus culture to encourage using the DMP tool, or at the very least uploading to the DMP tool after it's done. Uploading a completed DMP to the DMP tool is something that was available for this pilot project that we're testing that we hope to add for all users in the future. Kat, I don't know if you want to add any more to that or if we should go on to other questions. All right, so going on to other questions, I'll just answer some of them live. So is the data stewardship wizard being explored by any US institutions? So for the data stewardship wizard is another tool kind of similar to the DMP tool, though it works a little bit differently about creating machine actual plans. It's a great tool. I'm not specifically aware of US institutions using it, but I'm sure they exist. That's just that, I'm just more knowledgeable about the one that I work on. They are part of that RDA group that I'm talking about, that I mentioned, trying to build a unified API spec. So the goal is, all of these DMP service providers like Data Stewardship Wizard and DMP Online and DMP Tool, eventually the goal is to have a basic API that works similarly, that somebody could build an integration with all of them almost as easily as building it with a single one. So I hope that people do explore other tools to find if there's something that works for them, if that works out better for their case. Somebody else asked to everyone, are any of the machine actual DMP materials licensed in a way that will allow others to access and use them at their universities? So I'll answer for the DMP tool, and then others please answer for your own. The DMP tool code is open source. It's freely available online. It uses the MIT license. So there are people that copy and make their own versions of it. People are able to use that code. We're working on the rebuild right now, and once that's out, that will be open source as well. So if anybody wants to answer for any others, I see Kat, raise your hand if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, at UCR, we had developed it in the proof of concept application with in mind to eventually share it. We also didn't realize that basically the campus was going to say, hey, let's develop this other large thing. And so that's what they've been focusing on, the researcher portal. But the reason that we hadn't been able to share the proof of concept app publicly yet is because anyone could actually deploy computational resources using that app. So we needed to make sure, and that it talks about like the data security and these little things that we don't always think about that actually opens up to a large vector of attack if somebody knows how to do it. And so that is still on our radar, to take out the ability to actually deploy things on UCR's Google Cloud platform. So then you can just see how it was developed and the basic code behind it.
And I'm happy to add, as far as it's not code related, but we do have a lot of exercises and activities that we developed to kind of engage other campus units in conversations about DMPs and machine actionable data management and sharing plans, and are more than happy to share any of those resources if folks want to run similar workshops.
Yeah, and I'll just add that anything that we create in the Galter library that's trending related, or any code that we write that doesn't have sensitive information or deals with Feinberg IT directly, we're happy to share that too. So
all right, I'm going to go on to the next question. So I'll just read it out for everybody because I don't think everybody can see all the questions. So thank you for sharing these experiences. Interesting to see how you all are addressing this topic at your respective institutions. This person is going to be talking later with institutional folks about running their own pre-award proposal system, about ways to incorporate a data management tab into that system. Getting the system to notify relevant support units about data sets to be created or resources to be allocated seems like the most important step to advocate for. Any other recommendations based on the experiences that you all shared? I will open that up to anybody that wants to share anything that they can think of. Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, we had similar conversations about trying to get, we have like a checklist here that goes out to all PIs during the pre-award process. And so we had some preliminary conversations about maybe adding things to that. But I think what we learned from that here is that, trying to, and this maybe is obvious already to you, so apologies if so, but trying to kind of encapsulate the information you're looking for into like checkbox-like questions, I think is super key. Don't rely on any kind of free response or narrative options there when you're incorporating your data management plan into that process, because the free text stuff that we saw was just way too general to be helpful. Also, I think in terms of the planned data sets in particular, like again, this might be obvious, but when we started looking at things that people had written, if they wrote anything about that at all, compared with what we actually saw in terms of published data sets and other outputs, just completely different. Not even in the same universe as what they had said at the beginning. So I think this notion that people, and this may not be true. I'm sure it's not true for all cases, but I think in a lot of cases, people don't know what the data set's going to look like when they're in the pre-award process, and so many things change by the time they're actually getting to the data publication process. That again, that just might be something to kind of think about and account for in terms of what the actual important pieces are that you need for your resource allocation decisions and things like that.
Awesome. Anybody else want to share anything on that question?
I'll just say that we did have similar comments from places like the Office for Research, who would like to know when a DMP was created, if there's going to be anything involving the systems that they manage, like a microscopy unit or a large amount of storage being required. They would much rather know, even if it doesn't end up getting funded, that it's possibly coming, rather than wait till it's funded and now all of a sudden we need 100 terabytes for this person, and on and on. So yeah, I think that's a big benefit. It's how to get that in place technically that we're working on now.
Pat, I think I saw you raise your hand as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, just to comment, one of the conversations that we had in the team really emphasized the DMPs are a living document, and that's something that we've all known for a really long time. And this is like proof of why they're living documents. So then we can upgrade or update the DMP as we know more information about that, about the project, about the resources that are being used, about the data sets that are being developed. And having that language and that conversation within our stakeholders and or within the team, because we represented different stakeholders, really helped to share that information out to the broader community on campus.
Right. We have some more time. Are there any more questions that people want to ask? Including panelists of each other. I'm curious, what was the most kind of surprising finding that you found with communicating with other departments? So to be more specific, there are a lot of departments that we expect the library to work with regularly. But I know we heard a lot from people about, unexpected collaborations that they found. Does anybody have anything that they didn't expect that would be kind of a benefit to their collaboration before they started this project?
I guess I would say the amount of communication that needs to be done for things to sink in is a lot higher than you think. Even though things exist for years on campus, we found that so many groups we talked to didn't even know there was a DMP tool. They didn't know what it was. They didn't know they could use it. They also didn't know about other units and what services they had or what tools they had. A lot of times this happens at all universities, I think, but there's a purchase of a tool to do a job over here, and then there's a purchase of a tool to do a job over here, and those things do the same job, and nobody talked to each other about how that might be able to be consolidated to work more efficiently. But this is a lot of universities face this, so working from the ground up is where we are, so we do that. But continuing communication just to researchers and to the services units is really important. And if I was doing it again, I would have started that first and just continued it the whole time. But it's always, I mean, people are very pleasantly surprised when they hear about these things, and they're happy to talk about them more often than you would think. So as long as you don't frame it as I'm creating more work for you, I'm actually trying to make things better. So yeah.
Go ahead, Kat.
It was sort of a tangential to the project, but in having the discussions when we were talking about like the specifics of tracking researchers, and I'm like, oh yeah, well, we'll just use ORCID IDs. And then basically everyone else is like, well, tell me about this thing of being able to track researchers about this unique identifier. And then that turned into another project at UCR where the research and economic development, they saw other uses of ORCID. And so it wasn't just here's this thing about the machine actionable DMP, and here's all of the research landscape and all of these things that libraries have already developed and have in place that can then help the different offices for different things. And they were thinking about using ORCIDs, and there was a visualization that I had created just as I'm like, this looks interesting. But then they were able to actually have validation of who the research partners are. And that also then goes into the security of like who has access to research. And I hadn't even thought that they would really be interested in ORCID as a larger institutional tool.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add, I think I just agree with both of those points, as I found from our workshop, even 2 full days talking about things, we just barely like started the conversation, and it seemed like people really wanted to know more, but really like starting at what is even in these documents, what do you actually do in your workflow, and then how could we actually, like, how are you working was really important, because everybody's using and is aware of different processes, systems, as Kat was mentioning, things like Orchid that other groups aren't aware of. And so finding that shared landscape, and then what are all those pieces and how do they fit together to build these workflows with machine actionable data management and sharing plans, but can take a really long time. So I think that idea of continued conversation, but also making folks aware of all the things that you already work on and are knowledgeable about.
All right. If there are no other comments, if people want to add, or no more open Q&A, I think we can end this first webinar in our series. As a reminder, we have our pilot project. That's bit.ly/mappilot. And on that project pilot page, that will share materials that we talked about. Here, a lot of people were interested in the materials to talk about. Anything that we have to share is going to be added to that project website in time. And you also will find links to our future webinars. So we have them every 2 weeks for the next couple months. And we're really excited to share more about this project. The next one is going to go more into depth about some of these automated notification systems and some of these notifications that people had developed, and then about resource allocation and more. And then the one after that is about our API development for people that are interested in learning how to build their own integrations and getting more into how you can start working with our API. So we hope to see you all at the future ones, and check out the materials we'll be sharing. Thank you all so much for attending. Thank you so much for the panelists for sharing your experience at university, and hope everybody has a good rest of your day.